Hey guys, it's Cauliflower and I need to vent today. Oh my God. So, I don't talk to you guys much about relationships. In fact, it's a very hard and difficult topic for me because of the my relationships over the years have been very, very intense and with very intense people, and therefore I've had a lot of things happen to me or during the time. Um, with them, things have opened my eyes to the way I view relationships now with men. I'm talking about with men. And so I don't really discuss it. In fact, I try to stay away from it. Recently, Chris and I did a Collie Chats and we talked about it and we touched upon a few things, but I didn't upload that video yet because I feel like sometimes it's kind of like a vague situation with me when I'm trying to talk about relationships and why it's so difficult. But I just had something happen where it's stirring up some old feelings in me, and it's making me realize that my choices in how I befriended people wasn't probably always the best, but I always had a way of wanting to be something for someone when they needed me. You know what I mean? And it's popping up again. It just happened. It was so stupid. It was something that happened on a Facebook comment. Oh man, I'm just going to put it out there. Something happened on a Facebook comment. It was something that was put up there. It was a post about my age, what people, how old did people really think I was. And, there were some people that knew me that threw some comments up there. And there were some people that decided to be funny. And it's okay because he's in my acting group and I love him dearly and I don't really mind. But after he made this little comment, like somebody else who I had a sort of I guess you could say internet relationship with, kind of made a sarcastic comment under that, and it just upset me. And it was like, you don't know me, and then you haven't spoken to me in all this time, and now you're commenting, and it just kind of agitated some things for me because I've always been this kind of a person where I'll get to know some guy and we'll become really good friends, and I mean really close, and it'll be like one of those things where we're confiding each other and everything, and some of those relationships have turned into actual relationships, and then those relationships turned into disaster. There's one in particular I don't discuss, and it's hard for me to because it really reshaped the way I looked at relationships. I mean, when I first started when I first started, I don't remember dating, not when I was younger. When I first started dating, when I left the Bronx, I was like 21. And I first started dating then because that's when I was kind of free of, all of the family situations that were going on, and I was moving on with my life, and I've never really been out there before where I was, doing social things and that kind of thing. So I had a group of friends. They all used to meet at a bowling alley, and I met all of them, one way or the other through that bowling alley, and some of them became my really good friends, and some of them became relationships. One in particular became a 4.5-year relationship. But I should have known from the moment that I laid eyes on him that he was going to be trouble, because he was trouble. I mean, he was that typical, guy, smug and good looking and beady eyes and, sandy blonde hair and earring and jean jacket. And he was like that rocker type. And he was that girl, stay away from him, but you didn't want to stay away from him type. And I hated his guts when I met him. And, I remember my mutual friend tried to introduce me to him, and he said some nasty comment to me or something like, go get my bowling ball. And I was like, fuck you, I don't know you. And then that must have had some impression on him, because he came back to me later on. He was like, I'm really not like that. That's not really who I am, which was bullshit. It was a line. But anyway, I fell for it. So we got to talking, and we became really good friends. But in the interim, he was one of these guys that needed constant attention, constant ego boosting, constant girl, whatever. He just needed women is my main thing. But I fell for him back then, and what did I know, But unfortunately, I ended up with him, and he was my first, He was the one I lost my virginity to, and my first real long-term relationship. I had seen other people before him, but he punched a hole in my world, literally. And we dated for 4.5 years, but because of the fact that he was that type of a person, so big of a personality, and so needed that ego boosting all the time, I wasn't that kind of a person then. In fact, I kind of was content to stay in the shadows. But there was one thing that I enjoyed doing and one thing that I loved so much, and that was singing. And I started doing karaoke with the group. We all went as a group all the time, and none of them were really great singers, but my ex thought he was, because he was a musician. And again, just to derive all that kind of like female attention and the glorification and the loving him and, complimenting him. And I remember when I first started singing, I would sit up on that stool and I would look down and I wouldn't even look at people. And my voice would just sing, and I couldn't project at the time, and I couldn't really sing to a potential that, maybe I wanted to. It was just a way of expressing things, and it was the way I try to express myself to him, because he was this type of person that just, it wasn't impressed all the time with the kind of person you were. Like, it didn't seem that way to me anyway. And so when I was doing that, I got the attention of people around, people that would just come, at the place that we were, and they would hang around, and they came a part of our group because they would come and watch us sing, and a lot of them would pay me attention, and slowly but surely he didn't like that. It took the attention off of him, or he didn't like to share the spotlight, so to speak. And that was where all of the self-esteem demolishing started. It was, I found myself coming from my home in the Bronx, where I had started all over again. I mean, my home was broken. My grandmother had just passed away. My mom and I was splitting up, and she was going one way, I was going another way, because it had to be that way. And making friends and getting used to a new atmosphere, and getting used to a new town and people, and being social. That wasn't me, and I was so guarded and so angry all the time. And so being around a group of people all the time, it was new to me. So I tried to fit in as much as I could. And then because I was starting to fall for this person, I started to grow my hair out, and I started to shop more, and I started to do more girly things, so he'd notice me more. And it ended up that I was like that transitional person, but I ended up being the main person because of what was in my heart, but not what was on the outside. Anyway, during our relationship, that kind of foundation grew into more resentment, because I would love him more, and he was more about wanting consistent attention, but also wanting to do his own thing. And there was a lot of cheating going on by him, and just a lot of things that he did to me that I should have never accepted. And one of those things was, of course, he started to hit me, and it was very volatile, and it was very demeaning. He found his way to cut me down any way he could possibly do it. He would insult me a lot. He would berate me a lot. He would make an example out of me, just to be funny. And I went along with it for a long time. But then after a while, I started to develop this resentment and this anger and this, like, who is this guy? Like, why am I putting up with this? So lo and behold, there was so much chaos in those 4.5 years, and things going on. And I had become pregnant by him when I was 25. And I knew it from the get-go that it wasn't going to be pleasant. It wasn't going to be something that I wanted to happen. And unfortunately, from the way my body was receiving it, and from the fact that it was a stressful time and our relationship was so volatile, I didn't want to bring a child into the world with him. And I made it very clear that my choices were going to be that even though I was against it, I was not going to live my life with a child with him. It may sound selfish, but it was something I couldn't live with myself with, knowing what kind of a person he was. And long story short, even though I opted for an abortion, I was told that I was never going to carry to term because I was already losing it. And that was kind of like the pinpoint of how our relationship started to decline for good. You know, I always went back to him no matter what, but this was like slow decline. You know, it was like inevitable. It was going to crash and burn. And it did. You know, I had some time away from him. I went away for a while to Florida, to Louisiana. Then I went to Florida, and you know, I met up with some old friends, and when I had some distance away from him, he didn't like that, and he, you know, he would harass me and come after me and that kind of a thing. But I finally left him, and I finally left the state of New York because of him, and I moved to Florida and lived there for like a year, and again got into another bad relationship, and again had to, you know, regroup and come back to New York, and you know, so anyway, leading up to this other person that I don't ever talk about. I met this person after I came back from Florida online. We were in online chat rooms. It was like one of these poetry chat rooms, whatever it was. And there was something about him I knew right off the bat. You know, even through computer, you can just know when somebody is just gets you. And we were like that. I would go to the library every single day. I was living back with my mom at this point. I had just regrouped myself and put my tail between my legs, and I took a shitty part-time job. I was sleeping on my mom's couch. I had to, you know, just start all over. And I met this guy on the internet, and it turned out that he only lived about 3 hours away from me in Rhode Island. And his humor was like mine, you know. He had a dry sense of humor, but underneath that, he had this sweet quality about him, very genuine. And I remember we exchanged pictures in the mail before, you know, the internet was like the only way you can do that. And when I saw him, like, my heart just jumped out of my socket, and I fell for him right away. And, you know, we had sort of like a fairy tale beginning where there was a setup where we were supposed to meet each other, but we didn't end up meeting each other, even though we were in the same place. Like, I drove with a friend for 3 hours out to this dive bar out in Rhode Island, and you know, we were supposed to meet, but he was sitting at the bar and we were in the restaurant section, and it just didn't happen. But I had walked right by him, and I saw him too, and it didn't click to me that it was him, but I walked right by him, and you know. And the very next day after all that happened, because I was crushed thinking he didn't show up, we had said that, you know, we were there, and my other friend decided to drive me back 3 hours again. And this time we met at a Dunkin' Donuts, and it was like the way you want to meet the love of your life. You know, he was sitting in a corner, he had the newspaper, and he had his coffee, and he kept like looking over, you know, like kind of being sly, but knowing that it was me. And I knew it was him, but I didn't know how to approach him. He didn't know how to approach me. And he got up, and I will never forget this. He got up and he went to go over, like, to get a drink from the Snapple area. And as he's bending down, I hear like clinking going on, and it was like a bunch of bottles came out, and it was so funny. And then we both laughed, and he smugly walked over with this sweetness, and he was like, you know, so you're Dawn, right? And it just went from there, and we were very shy with each other, but we were very loving to each other, and, you know, I mean, it was like instantaneous. So it was everything that I wanted it to be, and we fell in love, you know, probably that day. And then we started the long distance thing, because he lived in Rhode Island, I lived in New York, and he was working at the same place I was working at, only mine was in New York and his was in Rhode Island. And, you know, he would come up every once in a while. I would go to Rhode Island, but he also suffered from a very crippling mental disease, and I had no idea how bad. You know, he had schizophrenia. It was really bad. And I found that out, you know, on weekends where I would come to visit him, and he would have episodes where he did not want me to leave, and it was so bad that he would just go through these things, these episodes I didn't understand, you know. But throughout the course of time between between kind of internet, talking and, seeing each other, every once in a while, he finally decided that he was going to move to New York. He was going to, get a place here, and him and I would live together. And he did. And everything happened so fast. Everything happened within a course of 4 months. He left Rhode Island, he left where he was, and I was still with my mom and still working at the same place. So he transferred to this place. And we found a little place near my mom, right near a lake. And it was really sweet, it was just a one-room apartment, two-room apartment, it was the bedroom, and then we had it was like a studio apartment. And it seemed like everything was going to be hunky-dory, but it didn't work out that way. Like I said, he has this crippling mental disease, and money was an issue. There was some, past things that was an issue. If we had a fight, he wouldn't handle that just as a fight. It would be a whole episode. He took off on me, finally. The first time he did it, he left my apartment wide open. There was some bills that needed to be paid. He ripped them up, left them on the counter, wrote a bunch of different things on a big notebook, failure and all these kinds of things, and scared the crap out of me. And he took off and went back to Rhode Island, and I ended up going into the hospital because mentally I couldn't deal with it. And that was the nature of our relationship. It was so intense and so, just we wanted it to be, but the circumstances with ourselves and with everything else was so hard that we couldn't. And we tried. He came back at some point, but we had to end up leaving my apartment because we couldn't handle the bills and we couldn't handle paying the rent. We ended up moving in with some friend of mine that I had met through the hospital, of course. And we lived with them for a while, but things just became more and more tense when you live with other people and you have the kind of relationship we had. And it's funny, that's when I started working at the bookstore, Borders. And he did too, but he didn't stay. He took off. He took off December 31st, 1999 on New Year's Day. He packed up, he left his car, he left his, possessions, went back to Rhode Island, and I decided at that point in time I had enough, that I was just going to pick up and, not put up with it anymore. And it broke me because he was somebody that, I loved deeply to the core of myself. I mean, more than I loved myself, I loved him. And he felt the same way about me, but because of his mental problems and because of his inability to understand some things about me, he struggled with a lot of that. We fought about a lot of things that, he was sorely against me talking to exes, even though, I had really no caring about anything. It was like, why are you still talking to them when you're with me? Or why do you allow people to talk to you like this? And he had a point, But I didn't know how much I really loved him until, you go through it. And ever since him, no one was ever enough. No one was ever good enough. No one was ever going to be good enough. I started to take a decline myself with men and, dated people that were completely not for me, not like me or whatever. And became the doormat and became the person to try and help them when they had issues. I mean, I dated, a younger guy who had a horrible, drug addiction, drinking addiction. I dated somebody who was in between another relationship and just pretty much used me because, he wanted to get back at her. I was that girl. I was that girl that everybody used, that transition person. And I wasn't that transition person for, Justin is his name. I wasn't that transition person. I was the person. And it was so hard for him to understand, my need to want to know why things went the way they went or anything like that. And after a long time, I we kept in contact. I always kept in contact with him because I was always worried about him. I was always scared for him because he was in multiple hospitals. He tried to attempt his life many times. When I was dating the younger guy who had the drug problem, I remember I was still living with our mutual friend, and I had spoken to him on the phone and told him of what was going on, that I had, been dating somebody. And on the phone with me, he had taken a knife to his hand and he just started to cut himself. And, I could hear him yelling in the back, and it didn't register to me that, his illness was so bad and that, I couldn't do anything to change that. But he made it so that I was afraid of him at the same time of loving him. And a couple months later, a girlfriend of mine was getting married, and I had started to transition into talking and trying to get back together with Justin. And I invited him to come to this wedding with me. And we went to my girlfriend's wedding, and I had caught the bouquet, and another person caught the garter. And when that happened, my boyfriend at the time took it so badly. Like, it was like a moment for him to crash. It was like he saw somebody else putting something on my leg, and it just triggered something, and he went off and started to get upset. And I remember that he ran up to the roof of the building and he was crying, and I had all these people following him and running after him, and oh, he loves you so much. And all I felt was resentment at that point, and anger, and like, why is he doing this now? Like, why does he keep doing these things, And I remember later on after that, we were in our hotel room because we had gotten a hotel room that day. And he had started to undress, and he started to roll up his arms, and I saw deep, deep marks on both arms. And I questioned him, and I'm like, what? And he said, I did this to myself because I thought I was losing you. And that became one of the most wake-up calls I have ever seen. Like, he had taken a house key to his arm and cut so deep into his flesh that he marked up his arms, all because he thought he was losing me. And that wake-up call came, and I decided right then and there I could never be with him again, because I could not handle somebody eventually, God forbid, dying on behalf of me. So that became my 6-year crusade after that. It took me 6 years to try and get over him, which never worked out. But slowly but surely, I distanced myself, even though I always wanted to stay in contact with him, and I loved him, and I loved him immensely. It never really stopped. You never really stop loving them. It just becomes to the point where you have to say, is this what I want for the rest of my life? And I can honestly say, even though, if you had to ask me today, would I take him back? I probably would say yes. But under the circumstances of, how I'm living now with my daughter and everything, no. But it just paved the way of how I felt about, meeting anybody afterwards or becoming involved with anybody afterwards. Because once you meet somebody like that, and once somebody punches a hole in your world like that and hurts themselves to the point of, you can't take that back. And you can't think anything good is ever going to come out of it, And for me, all I ever wanted was just to be in love and in a real relationship and have, all the things that come with that. And it never happened that way for me. Everything was a struggle. Everything was chaos. Everything was, like I said, my first real relationship, there was nothing but volatile, stuff and violence going on. My second, one after that, same thing, in fact, it was worse, than the first time. And then Justin, and then the people that came afterwards until I met my daughter's father and made my real, connection with what love means and family means. And then there's Chris. But I don't disclose my personal life because for me it's just something that I don't want to do. It's just something that I just feel that, it's easier to share pain than it is to share happiness. Happiness comes and goes, you know, you never really know how long you're going to have it. And I've been really lucky and really fortunate to have who I have now in my life. And you know, it is the way it should be, you know, the way I wanted it to be with Justin, but never was. And I guess in a way I needed to make this video to finally really realize that I let go and that I moved on, and hopefully someday he sees this, because he's heard me enough, you know, over the years. And we were talking up until last year, and then he disappeared again. And I don't know where, because, you know, he disconnected his phone, and, you know, this is the kind of thing he does. But I never got a chance to see him again. I never got a chance to really close our situation if it ever needed closure. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I don't know. But he will always remain my soulmate, the one I will always continue to love throughout my life, you know, whether I see from him or talk to him or not, you know. I've learned how to transition myself, and you know, I'm better for it. I just don't divulge that information, and this is why, you know. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of women out there that don't want to talk about, you know, that they were in domestic violence relationships, or, you know, mental illness relationships, things like that. But I've had them all, and I'm still sitting here, and I'm still moving on and healthy, and you know, I have a great daughter, and I have a great family, and I have, you know, my best friend who I love more than anything. And you know, sometimes it doesn't always happen for you at the time you want it to happen, but it does happen. And you know what? Any of them that have hurt me this way, I've always wanted them to feel loved and happy and supported, and I just hope that I did that for them, you know? So, I'm sorry, you guys. I don't even know why I decided to do this, but it's just something that I had to do, and I just hope that maybe some of you could understand, like, this is why I don't say a lot of personal things about my love relationships, and why I sometimes seem guarded, and you know, like I said today, this kind of just conjured this all up from, you know, just some guy that made a comment on my, you know, Facebook page, because like I said, you know, I make friends with people, and I become transitional, and it ends, and then it's like, you know, you have that residual sitting there, and you don't know what to do with it. So this was a result of it, and it's almost a half an hour long. But anyway, that's it, guys. I've talked enough. So I'll see you in my next video. Bye.